So, uh, if I told you that a 1930s Depression-era law, a 23-square-mile wall of fire, and a fatal shadow puppet joke all share the exact same underlying threat to your daily life, you'd probably think I was crazy.
I mean, I would definitely think you were stretching it a bit, yeah.
Right. But today's stack of stories actually reveals just how fragile the systems running our world really are. We're doing a deep dive into the August 24th, 2026 edition of the Daily Grind News.
Specifically, Bill Davis's Morning Six-Pack newsletter.
Yeah, exactly. And the common denominator here is what happens when massive abstract systems abruptly collide with everyday reality.
Which happens a lot more often than we'd like to admit.
It really does. And I should say right up front, because we are touching on some intensely charged political and geopolitical debates today, from border enforcement to voting rules, we're checking our own politics at the door.
Right. We have to.
Yeah, we're here strictly to look at the mechanical reality of these stories, just unpacking the facts without endorsing or criticizing the policies themselves. We aren't taking sides.
No, we are dissecting the machinery of the news, not the morality of it. We're looking at the literal friction points where international trade policies, federal bureaucracies, and geopolitical standoffs just hit the ground.
And the biggest piece of machinery operating in the background of this newsletter is global geopolitics. Specifically, this impending clash with Iran.
Oh, yeah. That is a massive one.
Yeah, so Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is preparing what he calls the single greatest financial offensive ever against Tehran. He actually dubbed it an economic D-Day.
An economic D-Day. Wow.
Right. It's intense.
Well, the terminology there is designed to be weaponized. I mean, in diplomatic circles, declaring an economic D-Day is a signal to global markets that this isn't just another round of, targeted sanctions on aviation or crypto.
Like it's not a surgical strike.
No, exactly. It's an attempt at total systemic isolation. Bessent is explicitly warning that any nation acting as a financial artery for Tehran is going to be excised from the U.S. financial system entirely.
So it's basically a binary threat.
Yeah.
You're with us or you're cut off.
Right. It's an all-or-nothing approach.
And Iran's response is just as absolute. Mohsen Rezai, he's the secretary of their Supreme National Security Council. He warned that countries participating in these restrictions will just be treated as enemies. Outright.
Which is a heavy word to throw around.
It is. And practically speaking, Iran's state-controlled Persian Gulf Strait Authority is threatening to fine, seize, or confiscate ships in the Strait of Hormuz.
And in retaliation, the U.S. president just declared the strait a U.S. territory.
Which sounds like poking a hornet's nest while standing on the world's main gas line.
That's a good way to put it, actually. The physical geography is what makes this so combustible.
Right.
We have two nations launching rhetorical missiles at each other, but the actual battlefield is a maritime choke point where roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil passes through every day.
20%. That is a massive chunk of the global energy supply.
It's huge. And when you threaten to seize a commercial vessel in that specific corridor, the immediate casualty isn't necessarily a military ship. It's the global supply chain.
Right, because of the ripple effects.
Exactly. It instantly alters maritime insurance rates, which mechanically drives up the cost of everything on those ships before a single shot is even fired.
Okay, but wait. I don't buy that the threat alone is enough to panic the markets, because the newsletter highlights a pretty massive contradiction here.
Which part?
Crude prices actually retreated in Asian trading.
Oh.
Like, West Texas Intermediate is sitting around $85.93 a barrel.
Yeah.
And Brent is near $93.22. Bill Davis's newsletter even calls this a potential buying opportunity.
It does, yeah.
So if a fifth of the world's oil is moving through a choke point currently under threat of immediate seizure, there has to be a mathematical reason prices are dropping.
Right.
Right? I mean, traders don't just blindly hope for peace.
Oh, they definitely don't. They look at physical inventory and probability algorithms. What you're seeing is the tension between the geopolitical risk premium and hard, localized data.
What do you mean by localized data?
Well, commodity markets operate on verifiable disruptions. Until a supertanker is physically boarded or a shipping lane is heavily mined, algorithmic trading models often price in a diplomatic off-ramp.
So they assume the politicians are just talking.
Essentially, yeah. They look at the global oil reserves, current output and demand destruction in other sectors, and they calculate that the supply is currently stable. The market essentially calls the politicians' bluffs until the precise second the bluff becomes reality.
Wow. So the disconnect between a political declaration of an economic D-Day and paying less than $90 a barrel, it's just a fragile illusion holding the global economy together.
It's a system under immense strain that is essentially just holding its breath.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it. And, you just described massive federal apparatuses projecting power abroad in the Middle East, but look at what happens when those exact same apparatuses refuse to communicate at home.
Oh, the Joshua Aviles story.
Yeah. The newsletter brings this global standoff down to a jarringly personal level. So Joshua Aviles is a sailor deployed for 9 months on the USS Abraham Lincoln.
Which is currently out in the Middle East supporting the exact mission against Iran we just discussed.
Exactly. But back in the United States, Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE has detained his father.
It's a staggering mechanical breakdown between federal agencies.
It really is. And based on the reporting, the father wasn't hiding in the shadows or anything. He possessed a driver's license, a social security number, a work permit, and a pending green card application.
Right, so he was documented in the system.
Yes. But the Department of Homeland Security's stance is completely rigid. They stated that a work authorization and a pending application do not equal legal immigration status.
All right.
A DHS spokesperson told NBC News that they are simply enforcing laws passed by Congress, emphasizing that the administration does not pick and choose which laws to enforce.
Which is their mandate.
Sure, but how does a pending green card mechanically fail to act as a temporary shield against detention?
Because of database architecture and binary statutory triggers.
Binary triggers.
Yeah, DHS operates on strict categorical imperatives. To the ICE database, an application in a pending state does not confer an approved status code. It's a 0 or a 1.
Oh, I see. So it's literally just a computer logic thing.
Exactly. There is no algorithm for this individual has a son deployed on an aircraft carrier. The agency's mandate is strict immigration enforcement, and they're executing that mandate without cross-referencing the Department of Defense's mandate of military readiness.
The human cost of that bureaucratic silo is just profound. I mean, a Democratic lawmakers report, this isn't an isolated incident either.
No, it's happened before.
Yeah. ICE has previously arrested 125 veterans and attempted to deport at least 282 veterans and family members.
That's a lot of families impacted.
It is. And Aviles is working 12-plus-hour days in a war zone while his father sits in a detention center. We're talking about institutional betrayal. How does the military even function when the state a soldier is defending is actively dismantling their family?
The psychological toll creates severe cognitive dissonance for the service member. I mean, you're forcing an individual to compartmentalize their duty to a massive geopolitical strategy while suffering under the domestic policies of the exact same government.
It's completely contradictory.
It is. And it highlights how federal agencies operate as completely independent fiefdoms. They don't share a unified central nervous system when it comes to the collateral damage of their policies.
And it's one thing when two different executive agencies, Defense and Homeland Security, refuse to talk to each other. It's a whole different level of friction when an executive agency decides to actively ignore the judicial branch.
Ah, yes, the USPS ballot rules.
Yeah, the United States Postal Service has just published 95 pages of proposed mail-in ballot restrictions.
This whole situation is a masterclass in administrative maneuvering. The USPS is trying to mandate that states provide specific information about voters requesting mail ballots, and they want states to redesign ballot envelopes with USPS readable tracking barcodes.
And the crazy part is they published these final proposed rules despite being actively blocked by federal courts.
Right.
U.S. District Judge Indira Talwani blocked these exact requirements in June and then issued another preliminary injunction on August 11th. She explicitly noted that the midterm elections are fewer than 90 days away.
Which is a critical window for election administration.
Exactly. And this originates from an executive order by the president back in March. But Postmaster General David Steiner defends the rules, saying USPS needs to match the ballots a state believes they're sending out to what actually enters the mail stream.
The USPS is leaning heavily on the argument that this is strictly a logistical mail operations update, completely divorced from election administration.
But critics and voting rights groups are pointing out the obvious mechanical flaw in that logic. Imposing tracking barcodes and data requirements directly alters how states administer elections.
Right, which is a constitutional domain reserved for the states, not the federal government.
Exactly. Judge Talwani literally wrote that this attempt threatens increasing chaos and erosion of trust. I mean, it's like a football coach printing a completely new playbook and forcing the team to memorize it while they're standing on the line of scrimmage, just betting that the referee will look the other way when the ball is snapped.
That's a really good analogy.
Okay, but let's unpack this. How can an agency publish 95 pages of rules that a federal judge just explicitly barred them from using?
Well, by creating rules in waiting under the Administrative Procedure Act?
Rules in waiting.
Yeah. So the executive branch is banking on a legal reversal at the appellate level. If the USPS waits for a higher court to strike down Judge Chalwani's injunction, they wouldn't have time to go through the mandatory public comment and publication periods before the midterms.
Also, they'd miss the deadline entirely.
Exactly. So by forcing the 95 pages through the administrative pipeline right now, the rules are fully baked. They're ready to snap into effect the second an injunction is lifted.
But the operational chaos that creates on the ground is terrifying. State election directors are currently printing millions of ballots. They literally do not know which legal rulebook they will have to follow in 60 days.
And that is the intended friction. The administration is testing the absolute limits of executive power domestically, pushing past the traditional deference agencies give to lower court rulings.
And the executive branch is testing its limits internationally, too. But instead of writing new rules, they're digging deep into the historical archives to find a 100-year-old skeleton key to wage an economic war against Canada.
The scale of this trade dispute is breathtaking. I mean, it perfectly illustrates how fragile North American supply chains have become.
It really does. The U.S. just hit Canada with 50% tariffs on over $28 billion in goods.
50% is massive.
It's huge. We're talking plywood, cement, wine, hockey sticks even. $4 billion in electronics are hit. $3 billion in plastics.
And the Canadian response was immediate.
Yeah, a dollar-for-dollar retaliation. Prime Minister Mark Carney suspended negotiations, pulled his team home, and blamed last-minute changes by Washington. And then U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer blames Canada for introducing new demands.
The sheer speed of the collapse is wild.
It is, but the legal mechanism is what I really want to dissect here.
Yeah.
The U.S. imposed these duties using Section 338 of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. That is a Depression-era law from 1930.
Right, and Smoot-Hawley is basically radioactive in trade history because it famously exacerbated the Great Depression.
Exactly.
Section 338 is a specific provision designed as an emergency lever. It basically allows the president to unilaterally impose massive new duties on countries deemed to be discriminating against U.S. commerce.
Okay, but hold on. I need to push back on the definition of an emergency here. Canada is arguably our most integrated trading partner. How does a modern dispute over plastics and plywood legally qualify for a 1930s economic doomsday provision that lets the president bypass Congress entirely?
By legally reclassifying a modern supply chain dispute as a discriminatory threat to national commerce.
Just changing the label, basically.
Pretty much. The executive branch utilizes Section 338 precisely because it operates outside the modern framework of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement.
So it bypasses all the usual red tape.
Right. It doesn't require congressional approval or a lengthy World Trade Organization arbitration. It is a blunt instrument of immediate executive authority.
I'd say a 50% tariff is beyond a blunt instrument. I mean, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce called it a body blow to North American competitiveness.
And they're right. Mechanically, a 50% levy triggers immediate demand destruction. If we connect this to the bigger picture, many of these cross-border industries like cement and timber in British Columbia, which relies on the U.S. for 13% of its exports, they operate on single-digit profit margins.
So a 50% hike is unsurvivable.
Oh, absolutely. When a 50% cost increase hits overnight, businesses don't just raise prices, they halt purchasing altogether.
The market just freezes.
Exactly. Contracts are voided, construction projects stall. A century-old legal loophole is currently freezing billions of dollars of modern commerce, turning consumers and businesses into involuntary hostages in a geopolitical staring contest to see who blinks first.
Wow. And, you know, all of the systems we've discussed so far, tariffs, federal court injunctions, border policies, they all rely on a foundational illusion of control. We write the laws, we dictate the terms. But the newsletter pivots to Nevada, showing us what happens when the physical world completely overrides our engineering and our legal frameworks.
Yeah, the Wildfire near Reno is a terrifying demonstration of systemic failure.
The statistics are just horrifying. The fire exploded to 23 square miles. 90,000 people are under evacuation orders or warnings.
That's a massive population displacement.
It is. That's 42,000 residents told to go NOW and another 45,000 in warning zones. 6 people are injured. Governor Joe Lombardo mobilized the National Guard. But here's the detail that really forces you to stop and think. The single metric in the newsletter that stops you cold is zero containment.
Right.
We talk about economic containment and political containment, but when a sheriff gets on the radio and outlines zero containment for a wall of fire, every single abstract bureaucratic concern evaporates.
It does. Zero containment means human engineering has completely failed to alter the physics of the event. The authorities are no longer fighting the fire, they are simply trying to outrun it.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The newsletter lays out the brutal arithmetic of the disaster. You take months of dry weather, a record lack of winter snow, you introduce high-shifting winds, and then add one human-caused ignition near Peavine Peak.
And it just explodes.
The resulting speed outpaces our technological safety nets. When a fire is moving that fast, mass communication systems fail. Evacuation apps can't push notifications fast enough to match the wind speed.
And the story of Carrie Kiefer in the newsletter
Hello.
really captures the raw terror of that speed. She and her husband rushed to their house as ash was already falling. They had virtually no time to rely on apps or official instructions.
They just had to act.
Yeah, they grabbed their 4 kids, their dogs, clothes, a Bible, wedding photos, and her mother's ashes. And by the time they fled, the house was entirely lost. Washoe County Sheriff Darren Balaam's public message wasn't about staging or logistics. It was simply, please get out if you can right now.
Flames were jumping over the fire trucks.
Yeah. Nature doesn't care about jurisdiction.
It doesn't. It ruthlessly exposes the limits of our infrastructure. When the environmental baseline shifts through extreme drought and wind, a single human error is amplified into a landscape-level catastrophe.
And a human-caused fire spanning 23 square miles is a macro failure of human judgment. But the newsletter ends with a micro failure that is just as devastating, highlighting how a single, careless human decision can end a life in a fraction of a second.
You're talking about the workplace tragedy in Apple Valley, Minnesota.
Yes. A 26-year-old tree worker named Tyler Anthony Lynch was killed on the job. His 34-year-old co-worker was operating the grapple on a heavy boom. And according to the criminal complaint, they were messing around.
Which is never something you want to hear around heavy machinery.
Never. The operator was allegedly using this massive piece of hydraulic machinery to play a joke, attempting to make it look like the grapple was grabbing Lynch's shadow on the ground. The operator moved the grapple and closed it without physically confirming where Lynch was standing.
The grapple crushed him.
Yeah.
The operator was arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter because he was the individual legally responsible for the boom, holding the commercial driver's license for the site.
I just keep trying to understand the psychology behind this.
Yeah.
OSHA is investigating. But from a purely human standpoint, how does a highly trained professional with a commercial license become so profoundly desensitized to a multi-ton hydraulic claw that they utilize fatal danger as a prop for a shadow puppet joke?
This raises an important question about human psychology. It is a textbook case of what safety engineers call the normalization of deviance, combined with severe psychological habituation.
Normalization of deviance.
Yeah, when a human brain interacts with massive mechanical systems every single day, whether it's driving a 2-ton pickup truck at 80 miles an hour or operating an industrial tree grapple, the brain stops processing the machinery as an external threat.
Oh, wow.
Neurologically, the operator begins to map the machine as a seamless extension of their own body. The danger just becomes background noise.
So the operator thought he had absolute precision, the same way you can control your own fingers.
Exactly the same perceived precision. But a hydraulic system doesn't have human sensory feedback. You can't feel what you are crushing until it is too late. The tragedy of assumed safety is believing that your familiarity with the system neutralizes its lethality.
Right.
There are machines you can joke around with, and there are machines you absolutely cannot. The moment a worker ignores that line, they invite irreversible tragedy.
So what does this all mean? We started by looking at macro systems and ended with the deeply personal. Whether we are analyzing a 50% tariff on plywood authorized by a 1930s legal loophole, an executive agency defying a federal court with 95 pages of administrative rules, a geopolitical chess match involving aircraft carriers and maritime insurance, or a fatal workplace stunt with a hydraulic boom, there's a clear through line here.
There really is. The core lesson for anyone navigating this landscape is recognizing the illusion of permanence. I mean, being well-informed isn't just knowing the current rules of the game, it is understanding the precise mechanisms of how quickly those rules can be rewritten.
Yeah.
A legal precedent, a supply chain, or a physical environment can be entirely dismantled by a sudden administrative maneuver, a spark in dry brush, or a momentary lapse of judgment by the person standing right next to you.
Our daily lives are constantly at the mercy of decisions made by others. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. Think about your own schedule, your own environment right now. How much of your personal safety, your financial stability, or your fundamental freedom relies entirely on the unspoken assumption that everyone else, from world leaders projecting power across oceans down to the coworker standing 3 feet away from you, is going to act rationally? And more importantly, what is your contingency plan when they don't? We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.